chat here, and those people who are listed are going to be able to play fictitious students along with my setup, and you'll be able to help me by showing and also seeing what the students see. Now, for everybody else, I will be showing both the student side and the test administration side, so that those who aren't playing along can actually see both sides. And I'm sorry if I'm a little sort of off to the side, because I just had to turn off the State Board of Education meeting, which, if you're not aware, is currently happening. And guess what they are talking about right now? So we are waiting to see if they make a decision today, and if they make a decision, where they're going to go with that. So as mentioned, my name is Bob Martin. I am with ETS. I'm the director for production. My jobs cover the actual administration of all the different assessments that we cover, along with test security, and the outreach team falls underneath my area as well. So I'm sure many of you, if you've been attending the office hours or the coffee sessions, have seen either myself or my team. And I hope that those are both sessions that you are all joining, and that you have been able to get some good information out of and see how we're moving along with things. The outreach team has been working very hard, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen here. And before I actually get into the practicing of the session, I'm going to talk about what's out there for you to be able to use to get information. So on both the CASP and the lpac.org websites, right at the very top, you have the spring of testing websites available for you. Everything is in this website, everything LPAC, everything CASP, all put into one thing. Everything about these websites is dealing with the remote, dealing with the spring, how to handle all the different sections. So if you haven't seen this website yet, again, you can just go to CASP.org, lpac.org, right at the top of both of them. They are, the links are there. And also known issues are being posted as well, so that you have that information. And I'm going to give you a known issue that we just found out about yesterday. Cambium, our partner who does the actual pushing out of the assessments for us, now when students are going into the remote sessions, where it says on the recording side, I could hear myself, it says try again. That is a mistake on their part. They are going to try to get that rectified as quickly as possible. Just have the students click that button anyways, and it will allow them to go through and into the test. So we were notified about that, and we are taking care of that. On this website, just in case you haven't seen it really fast, you have lots of different information. This one right here, I really like this page right here. It's called Practicing for Testing. And what this does is it allows teachers, test examiners, test administrators, and the like to actually practice with their students on how to do what I'm going to show you to do today, how to go through all the checks so that they can get into the assessments. And what that does is it gets them comfortable enough to do it so that when they are ready to do a real assessment, they can be comfortable enough to leave their test examiner Zoom meeting, go into the secure browser, and walk through the steps without somebody giving them the one-by-one steps. So this is a wonderful web page. We can talk about it later if it comes up. So what I'm going to do today, though, is I'm going to show you how the remote sessions work. If you haven't had a chance to see this in the coffee sessions or anywhere else, I'm going to give you a good look at it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to lpac.org, and on the right-hand side, or on the left-hand side here, there's a practice and training test. Now, if you are one of the people whose names I put into the chat with a fictitious student's name, what I'd like you to do on your computer, those 10 people, is go to lpac.org. And on the left-hand side, find where it says practice and training tests, and go ahead and click on that button. Now, this is going to be using what we call the web-based student testing interface. So I will be able to be doing it in a Zoom meeting. When students are testing for real in the Summit of LPAC, they'll be using the secure browser for grades 3 through 12, and then all CASP assessments will use the secure browser. You won't be able to do that inside of a Zoom meeting. I like to say that, and I'm going to say it a few times just to make sure you understand and that it sticks. So for my 10 fictitious students, what I would need you to do is to go ahead over here and you're going to click on Student Interface Practice and Training Tests. And I'm going to get rid of these other pages just so they don't get messed up. And this is where I get to find out how great of a student my teachers are. And I'm going to tell you, this is about my 15th or 16th RAND meeting. And I find, just like I've always done when I was in LEA, because I used to be the LEA coordinator for Burbank, sometimes teachers do exactly what they always complain about students doing, and they jump ahead before the instructions tell them to do. So for my fictitious students, once you've brought this page up on your screen, I'm going to ask you to just leave it alone. Don't do anything. A lot of people try to jump in ahead of time, and then I have to kick you out of the test and make you redo it. For the test administrators, that's myself, but when they're actually getting ready to give the test, this is what the test administrator interface looks like. This has a couple of minor changes, but for the most part, the test administrator interface works the same way it has done in the past. There is no real difference when it comes to the test administration interface, with the exception of the remote widget, which I'll be able to show you in just a second here. Now, Javier, I do want to tell you that I am not watching the questions. I'm more concerned about what's going on. So I will ask you if something pops up that that you think needs to be answered right away, you go ahead and interrupt me and just ask that question if that's okay.
Yeah, that's no problem. We'll do.
All right. And then Angela, I'm sorry, I'm actually going to steal your student from you. All right. So now it's the day of a test. I'm ready to give my students their assessment. They've been practicing. They know what they're doing. As a test administrator, I'm going to come into the test administration interface and I'm going to start a new session. If a test administrator has access to more than one school, it'll ask them at this point, what school are you testing today? This question has come up quite a bit because of distance learning. We have teachers in a school district who are teaching students across the district from multiple schools. Unfortunately, the way the test system is currently set up, a test administrator, test examiner can only test students in one school at a time. Now, they can have a role in multiple schools, but they would have to, if they're going to test students from different schools, they would have to do them at separate times. Now, what you can also do is, in talking with a couple of LEAs, we have it where, say you have 4 middle schools, A, B, C, and D, and you have students at all 4 schools who are remote, and you have teachers at all 4 schools who are remote, but they're crossing the lines as far as who their students are. Well, what one LEA is going to do is they're going to take any remote teachers at school A, and they will be responsible for testing the students in school A. And then they're going to get a remote teacher at school B to be responsible for all remote students at school B, and so on. Because the test assessment is set up in a way where you can assess multiple grade levels and multiple domains or tests, but you can't do it across the school. Now, I will tell you, we are already looking at that and looking at that for an improvement in the future. So I am in as a test administrator. I now have the selection of assessments as to what I can do and what I want to do. So I'm going to pick for today, because I've been using the LPAC quite a bit, and I don't want anybody to get, oh, you've already done this test. We're going to choose training tests, and we will select the ELA training tests. And here is one of the few differences that I was saying is within the test administrator interface. Once I've selected any assessment that I want to give that day, I then have to come down here and select remote, because I'm not doing this in person. All remote assessments for summative LPAC and CASP, if they are not in person, the test administrator and test examiner must select remote. even if they're doing the K2 summative LPAC, they must still select remote. And we have instructions on our website now on how to do a K2 summative within Zoom, selecting the remote and still being able to use your Zoom camera. Because we heard from test examiners, hey, my kindergarten students really don't see me during the assessment. If I do the secure browser, I want them to see me. So we figured out a way for the K1 and 2 to do a remote test and still use your cameras in Zoom. And those instructions are on the website. So I'm going to select remote and I'm going to hit start practice session. And the first thing that pops up is this block here, and it's got my my session ID, my training session ID going right now. Now, I need to warn people because they see this link here and they go, yes, there it is. I don't have to worry about it. I can send this link off to my students and it will take them into the secure browser and they can easily get into their tests. This link does not work for the secure browser. Now, Cambium, who runs this program, has a program set up for more than just us in California. So that's why that is there. And we've asked if that could go away, and they are looking at it because we do understand that teachers see that and they want to share that link with their students, thinking it will take them into the secure browser. It will not take them into the secure browser. So please, when you're doing a summative LPAC or a CASP assessment, don't give them that link. Now, my fictitious students, mine is the one that I stole their student from, go ahead and copy down this session ID. And I'm going to close this and it still shows up over here just in case you need to copy it down. At this point, I'm going to turn off my camera in the Zoom meeting because I'm going to be using the camera inside the test system. And you can't do both. You can't have your camera on in Zoom and inside the test system because the poor computer is sitting there going, I don't know where I'm supposed to be looking at. So if you are one of my fictitious students, please turn your camera off in Zoom as well. And we will walk you through this. So as a test administrator, I now have my session ID, but what I need to do is I need to tell the test it's okay to turn my camera on. So I will allow it. And what typically happens at this point is because I'm in Google, it will come up here and ask me if I want my camera turned on. But because I've already been working in and out of this morning, it already knows it. Now, as a test administrator, I have the ability to turn my camera on and off, and I can turn my microphone on and off. Okay. And then as a test examiner, I can also close out my remote widget in order to see the rest of my screen. And I just do that by hitting the X. This little megaphone here is how I would, as a test administrator, reopen my widget. Okay, so we're ready now for our test students. And I just have to get rid of this floating bar. There it goes. My test students, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. My 10 people who have their fictitious. You need to turn off the guest user and turn off guest session. In order for the remote widgets to work properly, because of federal rules and regulations and protecting young people with cameras and the internet, you must log in as a person in order to have the remote camera widget working the way it's supposed to work. So while you can do this with your test examiners as a guest user with a real session, and you'd be able to see the texting widget and the video or the messaging back and forth and the broadcasting, you wouldn't be able to get the remote camera to work because you must log in as a person. So my fictitious students, go ahead and type in the name I gave you and the SSID and the training session that was on my screen. And it's going to come up here on my screen in a second.
We did get a quick request in the chat about like a page where that might be documented, where with the use of Zoom and the cameras.
Yeah, I'll if you can remind me at the end, I'll pull up the Spring Remote Administration pages and I'll show you right where that documentation is. That will show you how to do the K2 and stay in Zoom.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, so my fictitious students, go ahead and hit sign in. This is the same as whether or not a child is in person or whether or not they're remote. It's going to first come up and say, hey, this is who I believe you are. Is this correct? The students would then look at their information, make sure it's them. They would hit yes. And then right now, as a fictitious student, you should only have an option to go into one assessment because I've only opened up one assessment. Now, remember, when you get into the CASP, especially when you're doing your makeups, you might open up a bunch of different assessments and the child may say, may look and go, I got 4 assessments. Well, what I always told my students is look at when you go into the assessment during makeup days, look for the one that has what I used to call the recycle button and do that one first. That means you already have a test you started. And let's face it, when you're trying to do makeup days, you have some kids who haven't done any of the assessments and you have some kids who have done 1 or 2 pieces of the assessment. So they would just log in and select whichever assessment they need to finish. And then after that would log back in to get the other assessments. Again, just like in person, they're now sitting here waiting for approval. And your test administrator, while they are at home, will see, just like they would in person, a list of their students who are waiting for approval. Now, somebody went in as a guest, so they did not turn off the guest session or the guest user. So I'm going to remove that person because they won't be able to use any of the remote widgets. And just like in a regular test, if you're going to not accept a student in, it's going to say, well, why? Why aren't you accepting the student? So we're going to deny that student. I'm going to refresh this really fast. So I have a list of my 3 students who are currently waiting to come in. Just like with the in-person, I can see who they are. And then I can also see this little eyeball icon. And this eyeball icon, if you've never really played with this before, this is what the current test settings are for that student. So if I have a student who has an IEP that has designated supports accommodations or such, what I should see is the word custom here, which says, hey, this child is using something different than normal. I can click on the eyeball and then I can look at their test settings to make sure it matches whatever the IEP is. If the student's IEP does not match what's set, then this child should not be accepted into the assessment. The child should be removed from the assessment. The site coordinator contacted and said, hey, you forgot to turn text-to-speech on for Johnny. He can't take the test until text-to-speech is turned on. But in this case, it's fine. We're all good. So we're going to approve our students into the assessment. And I'll just do it. Yes.
There's a couple of our test students that say that they can't get in. One of them says the session's not available, and somebody else is saying that they feel like they might be doing something wrong. They can't get in.
Well, if it's not available, we may have already used that test, so I will apologize for that. But for the other one, can you unmute and tell me what you're seeing?
This is Aaron. And when I tried to go in, it's telling me that the session ID has parts in the wrong format.
And you have D1C656?
I have, okay, are you talking about the session number or the SSID number?
Oh, what was your SSID number?
My SSID number was 989990044.
Let me just bring it up.
And then the session ID begins with train.
Right.
Fan 125.
All right, Aaron, I'm just looking for your name. So you're 989990044?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to apologize. These are fictitious students, so they may have played with them.
Okay.
That's the downside to using fictitious students, because my team in the background uses them for all sorts of things. And sometimes they break them on purpose to see if it catches a break. And unfortunately, they forget to tell me prior to my training whether or not they've done that. Okay. So I apologize for that.
No problem.
Okay. So we're going to go with the 3 students who are in at this moment. And we'll come back over here. So now we're looking again back at the student side of the house. and I will, just like the teacher, the student has to accept the fact that they will give their test up, or that they will allow themselves to be on camera. And I'm just checking here because, oh, my camera is turned off. There we go. Come on, Google. Google's playing with me here, so 1 second. There we go. You gotta love when these things happen while you're trying to demonstrate it. The nice thing about this is the fact that the secure browser doesn't have these issues. All it is because I'm in Zoom and I'm doing Zoom and 3 different cameras at the same time. So I'm going to try to force Chrome to look at this. Okay, let's see if that will take it. I'm going to block it and then I'm going to open it back up. Okay. I apologize for this.
There was
There.
a question about that little checkbox there. There you are.
Yep.
If agreeing is the only option, or if students are able to say no.
Well, and I apologize. Unfortunately, I have so many different cameras going on my computer right now. It got confused. But typically, the students are in a secure browser, so they don't see this little box here. So that doesn't go away. Now, this box, they have to hit select approve in order to get into the secure test itself. If they do not approve it, they won't be able to go into the test. So they either check it and go into the test, or not check it and they don't go into the test, and then they can explain to you or somebody else why they won't go into that. All right, so I apologize. I had so many cameras going on, my poor computer was confused, but we have the camera up now. I can see myself, I'm in. It's like Mike TV back in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, if you remember that movie. And now the second check that a student has to do is the record device check. Now, this is regardless of the assessment and regardless of the domain in LPAC. You know, a lot of test examiners come back and go, wait, I'm not doing the speaking. Why do they have to check their microphone? It's because the remote widget allows for a video phone call. So it wants to check the microphone with the student. In order to check the microphone, as it says here, you hit the recording, you describe what you're wearing. So if I was working with a student, they would just go in these steps here. Today, I'm wearing a blue fleece on top of a Dodgers t-shirt. And then they hit the play button. Today, I'm wearing a blue fleece on top of a Dodgers t-shirt. And if they can hear themselves, they will hit. So this is the issue I was talking about again. So right now it says try again. It's supposed to be I heard myself. Cambium's already aware of it. They are working to put the wording back. We were sort of surprised yesterday when that popped up. Now, I will tell you, if you are doing the K2 or the speaking domain LPAC, where you use the Zoom meeting and you do this with your child, with the students through the student-based interface on the web. Where we're running into problems is teachers are calling up and they're saying, I'm trying to do the speaking domain for LPAC and I'm doing the recording and I can hear my student, but it's not being picked up on the microphone. And we didn't think about this at first. However, it dawned on us once we started hearing this from a number of teachers. And our first question was, are you wearing headphones? And they said, oh yeah, I like to wear my headphones because it blocks out all the other sound. Well, the problem is what you're actually recording when you're recording the student for the summative speaking is it's coming out of your microphone and it's going into, or it's coming out of your speakers and going into the microphone. So if you're wearing headphones, the headphones are just playing in your ears and your microphone can't pick up what's in your headphones. So if you're doing the speaking domain, you can't have the headphones on if you're trying to record your student. Does that make sense? So, I mean, yeah, the microphone is using your computer speakers. Has anybody run into that issue and then realized they were wearing headphones and pulled them out and were able to do the recording? I see a couple of people with a little bit of nods. So again, you hit the try again for now. The next check, this is that wonderful sound that we all have nightmares about throughout the spring. I'm not going to call it anything else. As an LEA coordinator, I used to hear this in my dreams all spring long. Here we go. There is actually a young person who put out on TikTok weird things about California. And he actually included that song about the weird things in California for students. I'm going to hit I could play the sound and video. And then the last one is a text-to-speech sound check. Just like recording, every student has to do the text-to-speech sound check, because when you're using your remote widgets and you use what we call the broadcast, it actually reads your message to every student. So you just need to make sure text-to-speech is working. You do that by clicking on the speaker.
This text is being read aloud.
And again, if a child doesn't like that, I've had some students going, I don't like a guy. I don't want a guy's voice. Okay, well, you can make it a female voice and you can lower the volume. You can speed up the rate, whatever.
This text is being read aloud.
Makes them comfortable. And once they're comfortable with the voice, they hit I heard the voice and they continue. This is a page that's always been on the test. It's the page that every student ignores. They ask, why is this even here? And it's like, well, that's the instructions. So if you ever need help and you click on the question mark as a student, this is what you're going to get. And then I'm going to hit begin test now.
I'm going to throw a couple quick questions at you, Bob, if that's
Go for it.
One person asked if it's okay, do you recommend that the students not wear headphones?
The students, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
For the students, it doesn't matter. It matters for the test examiner when they're doing the speaking in order for them to record the speaking responses.
Perfect. And then with the video, there's an assumption, and we just want to make sure that it's clear. If they're in the secure browser, you don't run into some of those like video.
No.
Okay.
And most students don't have 3 cameras on their computer either, okay. Which was part of my issue this morning, because I'm sometimes into 2 meetings at one time. It's a little chaotic right now when you're in the testing world. So no, the secure browser does not have those issues.
Is there an instructional video kind of taking that, like that's kind of, I guess, family or student focused?
Yes.
Go through the check?
Yes. And I'll go back to those after the demonstration. We have created videos not only for the test examiners and test administrators, we've created videos for the parents and the students as well. And we have 2 different websites to keep everybody on just what they need to see to avoid confusion. You know, I'm going to go back to the one about the students and the headphones. Well, it doesn't really matter if a student wears a headphone or not. I would almost personally, as a former teacher and an LEA coordinator, I would say if students have headphones, tell them to wear them for a couple of reasons. One, it ensures that, especially if they're doing the listening part of the LPAC, it really ensures that they can hear it without a problem. And the other thing is it blocks out their surroundings. You know, these students are testing at home. We don't know what home situation they have. They could have a little sibling running around and screaming. They could have a mom or dad who are constantly walking by and wanting to speak to them. And those headphones are a nice block for students. So if they have them, I would definitely recommend that they do wear them just to help them focus. It's not a necessity for the assessment, but it is a nice help for focusing. All right, so we're inside the test now for a student. And up here, this upper portion looks the same. You have the same tools, you have the same abilities that you had in person. None of those tools have gone away. That's all the same. What is different for a teacher is, or for a student, is down here in the bottom right corner. This is our, what we call our remote widget. Now, this, if it gets in the way, as you can see, every time I roll over it, I have some arrows showing up. So if a student needs to move it, they can use the arrows and move the widget anywhere into one of the four corners so it's not in their way. The widget is showing a live video for them. And that's not what's being sent through the internet, but that's a nice reminder to them that, hey, your teacher can see you and your teacher can see what you're doing. So it's a little, hey, you know, don't be doing something you shouldn't be doing. In order to activate the remote widget, all they have to do is click on their face. And now I'm in the student's remote widget. And I apologize, you're going to see a cat in a second because my cat is in one of these moods where it's going to try to take the test with me. So in the remote widget for the student, right here, just like on the teachers right now, I can turn off and on sound and cameras. That is not the case for the real assessments. It's only this way because we're in a practice test. In the real assessment, these are not available for the students to use. What the students can use are right here in the lower right-hand corner. The first one is a raise hand. This, they click and it will show up, and I'll show you in a second. On the test administrator side, it shows that your student has put their hand up. It gets your attention saying your student needs to talk to you or communicate with you. The other thing that a student can do is they can send a message. They can send a text message to the test administrator, test examiner. By doing that, they click on messages and they type, help, what is sandcastles? And they can send that to their teacher. That's all they can do inside the remote widget. They can't turn the camera off. They can't turn the microphone off. They can raise their hand and they can send a message to their teacher. But I want to point out, if you'll notice, I can't do anything in the assessment right now. And that's because my remote widget is active. As soon as I close out my remote widget, I'm back in the assessment. And I'm going to stress this part because some test examiners, test administrators have gotten concerned about this. If I have my remote widget open, that does not mean I pause the test. So because some of the test administrators are going, wait, does that count as part of the 20-minute pause rules or what? No, I'm still in the test. I'm just, it's like I put a layer on top of my test. And once I close it, I'm back in. Now, if you'll notice, my little circle now has spinning lights on it. And it can show, it'll show me that my hand is raised up. So I can tell that I've already raised my hand and my teacher should be getting back to me anytime soon. All right, so let's look at the test administration side. So on the TA side of the house, right now I'm in what's called the list view. So I can see a list of my students. I can see what tests they're in, how far along, whether or not they're progressing, and I can look at their test settings. And then this, if you've never used this before, is the pause button. This will allow you to pause a student out of the assessment. Now, in-person assessments, this typically was used for if the student left the testing room without pausing their test, say they went to use the bathroom, or it was the end of a test session and the test examiner said 5 times, please pause your test before leaving, and they don't. The pause button will allow you to remove a student from the assessment. In this case, the addition to it is if you see something happening that shouldn't be happening, you can pause your student out of an assessment if you think they're cheating or if they're doing something they're not supposed to do. If you pause a student, the next time they hit next or backwards, they're going to get a message that says you've been paused out of this test. And then you, as a test examiner, test administrator, you can always at that point reach out to your site coordinator and say, hey, I had to remove Johnny from the test because his mom kept coming up and talking to him. And I asked her to not do that and she wouldn't stop. So I paused him out of the test. For all we know, mom kept saying, do you want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Why aren't you answering me? And poor Johnny's trying to take his test. But, you know, as test examiners, you don't know exactly what's happening in that house. We're going to close my remote widget. So the other two views are two other views, because when this first came out, some people love this little view because over here you have a view and you can see your students on camera. The other views that you have, because when I saw this, I went, I'm old, my eyes aren't great. How am I supposed to be watching my students in those little circles? And they said, okay. So they gave me the grid view. And grid view gives you a 4x across, and then it goes down with whatever students you have. If you notice, my camera is on right here and you don't see a live video. It gives you what we call a compressed video. It's actually taking a picture about every 5 or so seconds of your student and sending that. And the reason it's doing that is because we understand that students don't have the best technology at home. We don't know what the internet is like for each of our students. So by sending a picture every 5 seconds, you're using the smallest amount of bandwidth for students at any given time. And if the student really has a bad internet, it will compress it down even further for you. So I can see my students 4 across, and then I can even see a larger thumbnail of my students. Now, if I'm watching my students, and when I've had 20, 25 adults in here at one time, I actually was watching and I noticed, and I can see this in the Zoom meeting as well, all of a sudden, I noticed students' eyes were down in their lap because you could see where the keyboard was and you could see where their eyes were. So, and I always forewarn people, hey, you may be called on to camera when that happens. So when I would notice that people were sort of leaning backwards and looking down in their lap, what I would do is I click on that student, and you'll notice now the student is larger, and now it is a live feed. I can see what the student is doing. So if I notice that the student's doing something that looks a little odd, I can click on the student to see exactly what they're doing. The student has no idea that I've clicked on their video. So first of all, students don't even realize that they're not giving live feed to you, that they're giving 5-second pictures. But now I can see the student live, and I can say, and I've actually called people out. I said, hey, are you on your phone? And they're like, whoa, how'd you figure that out? It's like, you're looking at your lap. So same thing as students. I mean, let's face it, when you're in the classroom, it's the eyes, where the eyes are going, how the head is looking, things like that. You can see these things. So the other thing, I'm going to close this student out really fast. The other thing is, if you'll notice up here in the top left corner, I have both a hand and a dialogue balloon going on. So that tells me that the student has raised their hand and that they've sent me a text message. So when I click on the student, the first thing I would do is lower the student's hand for them. And the reason I would lower the hand of the student is, how many times have you been in a Zoom meeting and you've raised your hand in a Zoom meeting? The host has called upon you and said, do you have a question or whatever? And you've asked your question and they've moved on. And neither you nor the host remembered to lower your hand. And 5 minutes later, all of a sudden you're being called on again. And it's like, oh, is your hand up? Do you have another question? And you're like, no, I just forgot to put it down. So if a test examiner sees this and can put the hand down right away, it avoids you interrupting a student in the middle of a test going, yeah, what do you need? And they're like, nothing. What's up with you? And allows them just to take their test. And then I can click on the message dialog balloon. And I can come up here and it says, help, what is sandcastles? And I'm going to be a good test examiner, good test administrator, and I'm going to write back, please just do your best. And I'm going to send it back to them, because isn't that what we tell them all the time when we're in person? Oh, I'm sorry, I can't answer that. Just do your best. And if you notice, because I lowered my hand, now all the students are together. Over on the student side of the house, as a student, I can see that my hand has been lowered and that there's a dialogue balloon. So that means my teacher has sent me something. And I can look at this and I go, oh, please just do your best. Yeah, that helps me out a lot. Thanks, teach. And then if I need to, I can hit the play button here.
Please just do your best.
And I can have the text message from the teacher read to me if I need to have that happen. And then I'm like, great, whatever. And I just close out my remote widget and I go back to taking my test. The only other tool that is here for both the teachers and the students is this one here called the broadcast. And it's the megaphone. And I have to apologize because when we first started training this, we tried to think of everything, but we didn't think of everything because we had a couple of teachers go, I clicked on the megaphone and I spoke into my microphone and my kids aren't hearing anything. And we're like, what are you talking about? And then it dawned on us, it looks like a bullhorn. And what do you do with a bullhorn? You talk into it. Well, this works almost that way. But when you click on the broadcast, you can type out a message and you will send it out.
You have 5 minutes left in this session.
And it goes out to every single student signed into that test session. Now, I have my volume down a little bit, but what you just had happen was it opened up the remote widget for every student and it played the text message aloud for you. It played the text message aloud to get their attention. We have had this question come up of if a teacher sends a broadcast message to a student in the middle of a listening domain, and they are in the middle of listening to a passage, did you just mess that up for the student? And the answer is no. When the student closes out the remote widget, they will actually be able to play the entire audio passage again so that they can hear it. That way, because it would be horrible if a student was halfway through a listening passage, a broadcast message came up, they read the broadcast message and then had to only hear the last bit of the audio or have the audio locked. It will go back and allow them to replay it. Now, the other thing that we have available to us, I don't know who Fan 275 is.
I believe that's Angie.
Okay, I just turned off my microphone inside the test so I don't get an echo, but Fan 275 should be hearing me right now in their test and should be able to talk back to me if they have their microphone and camera turned off because it's a practice test, so they turned it off. And I can see here on my screen that they turned it off. So Fan 275, can you turn your microphone in the test back on for me? I'm not sure who Fan 275 is.
Where do I turn it on in that test? I don't see the mic option as a kid.
Do you have the remote widget in the bottom right corner of your screen?
Yeah, but it just has, it's like, it doesn't even give me a place. It just, I can raise my hand, but I don't see anywhere to even type or do anything.
Oh, okay. They didn't set up one of our practice tests properly. I'll have to get that one fixed up.
I did get your message earlier though, when you said we had 5 minutes left and it had audio.
Oh, it did have audio. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just don't have it set up for you properly. So hold on one second. Let's see if I can open up this person. Whoever Fan 275 is, could you actually share your screen for me? I'll stop sharing. Inside of Zoom, can you share your screen? Oh, wonderful. They don't have your student set up properly. Okay, I apologize for that. Unfortunately, we've been using these so frequently that I'm going to have to go back and have them reset all of my test students. Okay. So those are the tools that we currently have for our teachers. And then, of course, the broadcast message, the nice thing about the broadcast message is the fact that they can let everybody know when it's time to end their test and to pause. Let's go back to sharing my screen. There we go.
Please pause your assessments.
And then if the students aren't pausing their assessments, you can just pause them out. And this is also how I would pause out a student if they're doing something that they should not be doing.
Bob, we had a few questions pop up in the chat.
Go ahead.
Okay, so one that a couple of people had was when the students are doing their assessment, there was a question about like a Zoom Go Guardian during a summative assessment. Would that be allowed or not allowed because of the?
No, if the students are in the secure browser, they are not allowed to have any other programs open. So that stops that from happening.
So if
Now,
any folks had that question, if you want to follow up a little bit, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say with the summative K2 and for the summative speaking, that actually happens inside of a Zoom meeting. So in that case, we do have instructions on how to do it. But anytime the students have to go out and use the secure browser, all of that other stuff happens. Now, gets turned off. Now, especially when you're talking about a Chromebook, if you're talking about a district-owned Chromebook, students have to log out of the Chromebook in order to get to the secure app anyway. So all of that is gone. And I do want to stress this has to be a district managed Chromebook for you to do testing on it. So we have heard of cases where districts bought a number of Chromebooks and just to get them out, they didn't put them on the management system. And by not putting them on the management system, they aren't able to push the secure browser out. So what they're doing now is getting all those new Chromebooks they bought that they got out to their students, they're getting them onto the management system, because once they're on the management system, they can use them for testing purposes. I'm going to bring up the remote site here. So people were asking, where can we see how to run all this? So on the educator side, you have videos and quick reference guide. And you have videos on how to schedule, start, and stop a remote test session. You can actually schedule testing sessions this year ahead of time. So if I know I'm going to test on Thursday, on Tuesday, I can set up my test session and determine what assessments I'm going to give. And I can actually give that session ID to the students ahead of time. And then on that day, it'll open up. And then the thing about the test sessions is you can actually leave them open. Personally, as a former tester and an LAA coordinator, I'm a control freak, and I wouldn't want to leave a test session open just because I need to be in control of things. So I would always close out my test sessions and restart them. On a given day of testing, quite honestly, what I would be doing on any day of testing is I would have my students come in and meet up with me in the Zoom meeting just so I could take attendance, just so I would know who's actually there that day. And then once I have attendance, I would start a test session ID and I'd say to my students, okay, everybody, here's your session ID, write it down, hold it up. And this part came from an LEA. They're actually having the kids all pop them up in front of the camera so the test examiner can look really fast and go, yep, everybody's got the right one, and then send them off into the secure browser. I will tell you, when it comes to having the kids go out and get into the secure browser on their own, a lot of test examiners and test administrators are nervous. They're like, I don't know if my kids can do this, because there is, to quote an LEA, there is this moment of time where you can't communicate with your students when they're logging into the remote secure browser. We try this. We pilot it by using 5th grade students who very little instruction. We just said, here's your session ID. You know your name, you know your SSID. So what we're going to ask you to do is log out of Zoom, log out of the Chromebook, and go into the secure browser and we'll see you in there. Now, what we did, and we are recommending this, is we left the Zoom meeting open. All but 2 of the students popped up inside the remote test. They did the checks, they did everything they needed to. They were taking the practice test, no problem. 2 of the students had problems. So what they did is they came back into the Zoom meeting and said, it doesn't work. And we said to the first one, we said, what's your session ID that you wrote down? And it turned out that they flipped around a couple of the numbers and letters. So we corrected the session ID. They disappeared. They appeared back in the test, and boom, they were fine. The other one had an incorrect SSID. And because it was the only student inside the meeting, we could say, what's your session ID that you're using, or SSID you're using? And we said, oh, no, that's not supposed to be that number. It's supposed to be this number. So, and then they left the Zoom and popped in. The students are actually doing this pretty well with very little concerns. It's this nervousness we have as adults that I don't think it's going to work. I don't know if my kids can do it. And that's where doing maybe an interim assessment ahead of time. You can do an interim assessment using the secure browser remotely. And it's a wonderful way of practicing with your students to get them comfortable with doing the 4 checks they need to do to get into the remote. So again, with the videos, you have scheduling, starting and stopping a remote, how to give a remote test, how to take a remote test. And this is something as a teacher I could play and share with the students. We have LPAC test examiners information for K2, how to do things. And then we have LPAC grades 3 through 12. And then we have some quick reference guides and things like that. But if you'll notice down here, we also have a web page for parents and for students. And just like with the educators, it's got a lot of information, but more importantly, how to take an assessment at home. This one explains how to do the summative. And then we have videos for the parents and students to watch as well. And some of the videos that we have for our parents and students go to, if they're using a personal Windows device or a personal Mac, how they can download the secure browser onto their own device and still be able to test if they want to use their own device. All right, so I've been throwing a whole lot of information at you guys. You know, we turned the fire hose on this morning and just, you all stood in front of it. So let me ask, and we can do this where people can unmute, or if anybody wants to go through the questions in the chat and just throw them out there,
Yeah,
that works too.
Yeah, I have a few that I collected from the chat. One is, if you broadcast something, can it be replayed?
Yes, the broadcast message, just like a regular text message, has a little play button right next to it. So if the student is totally zoned out and misses the broadcast message, they can hit play and hear it again. And it also shows up in text, so they can see it.
Terrific. And then when you're viewing the feed of the students, can you hear them or just see them?
Only if they are in a video call with you can you hear them. And also only if you are in a video call with them can they see you. They will not see the teacher inside the secure browser unless the teacher, the test examiner, starts a video call.
Terrific. There was somebody that asked if there was a key, like a page with a key for all of the icons, the little cloud, like what all those things meant.
Yes. So on the educators page, under instructions for remote, there's a page called remote testing features. And it has those, and we're adding a troubleshooting guide as well that will show any of the little icons that appear if there's a problem with the test. We're writing that right now, so that should be up in the next day or two.
Awesome. And I'm going to encourage anybody that has those Go Guardian questions, because it sounds like those get kind of specific, if you want to unmute and pose a question, because it sounds like it's on the teacher's computer.
Go Guardian is a platform that a lot of educators are using so they can view what's on their learners' screens. So the question is, we understand that learners in a secured platform are not going to be able to view, any other tab except for the secured browser. But on the adult side, would we still be able to have a tab open that has Go Guardian up so we can see if they're even in the test or if they're off doing something different?
On the teacher side, they can have whatever they want running for the teacher, but I will have to check on this, Megan. I believe that once the child has logged out of the Chromebook, that they're no longer part of Go Guardian. And since they don't log into the Chromebook to get into the secure browser, I don't believe that function will work. And know this, because I'm hearing two things in your question. One is the Go Guardian, but the other is you're concerned about whether or not the kid's going to leave the test. The secure browser locks their computer down. They're not logged in, so they can't actually get to anything else. All they can see is the test. And you will know as a test administrator if a child leaves the test, because they'll change on your screen. Their camera will go away and it'll say that they paused their test. So you'll know if a child has left the test, and that's the only way they can go somewhere else if they're in the secure browser.
Got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, I have a question. So regarding Go Guardian, I just had a teacher call me during the administration of an IEB this morning, dealing with 3rd and 4th grade, which are not fully accustomed to taking these assessments. It's a 2nd or 3rd IEB that they've administered already. We're in a very rural area, so our internet connection is kind of spotty sometimes. So when a teacher loses a student in connection, they go to Go Guardian and they can see the activity of the student. One of the students was actually on Lexia or Moby Max and just totally disregarded the test, but did not complete it. So it allows us to redirect the students to get them back on task. But the question is that legal? And that's the question that's coming to me. And that's how do we make sure we need an answer sooner than later is what I'm strongly suggesting.
Well, again, though, for CASP in the Summit of LPAC, it sounds like your teacher is using the web-based student testing interface for the interim assessments. So in other words, the kids are still in a Zoom meeting but
they're out of Zoom. The Zoom is off, but Go Guardian allows us to monitor where our students are. But
if that student was using something else, then that tells me your teacher's not using the secure browser for the interim assessments. And that's okay. You don't have to use a secure browser for interim assessments. But for when we're talking CASP and the Summit of LPACs, you must use the secure browser. And that locks the kids from being able to do any of that other stuff.
Is anybody else experiencing this type of issue? I believe our teachers are in the secure browser mode.
Not if the kids using another program, because are they using Chromebooks?
Yes.
Okay. If they're logged into the Chromebooks, then they're not using the secure browser. In order to use the secure browser on a Chromebook, prior to logging into the Chromebook, down in the bottom left corner is the app.
Right. No, you're correct. You're correct. Sorry, my misunderstanding. I'm not the IT person, but
no, that's why.
But I get what you're saying. Yes, as soon as a student opens the Chromebook, there's an icon down at the bottom.
Right.
They click on that. It puts them into secure browser mode. So they are in that. So
it locks them down from everything else. They can't use any of the other stuff.
Okay.
When we've tried it, it will not work because you're going into kiosk mode with the own Chromebook. It's going to lock everything out. So even if they're back on site like they used to be, they couldn't get any other program because it's in kiosk mode. They're actually they're not really logged into their Chromebook. They're using the Chromebook as maybe a parent who is registering on a district device at the front office. There's no login. They're logging into the secure browser through their SSID. So to our knowledge, when we've tried it out here, it will not work because they are not in any district program. They're not inside of Active Directory program. They're not anything that's being managed by your district. It's the kiosk mode in isolation, which is why you don't want to use their own devices. You, like Bob said, you want to have district devices, not their own devices at home for the test.
Right. And David, thank you. I try not to use the word kiosk mode because it causes confusion, and sometimes it'll scare people and go, wait, what are you doing to the computers? So think about it this way. And unfortunately, I only see your last name, so I don't know what your first name is.
Melissa, sorry.
That's okay. So think about it this way, Melissa. They don't have a computer in front of them when they're in the secure browser. They just have this screen in front of them. Everything else is gone.
Okay.
So your teacher's using the interim assessments, which is wonderful. And she's using the web-based one. The downside, and this, so people have said, how come we moved the spring assessments to the secure browser when in the fall we allowed things to be on the web-based? And you just brought up the reason why we did that. The web-based browser doesn't lock things down. And that's why we're telling everybody to use the secure browser. If your teacher, now that the kids are comfortable logging in, if she has them go into the interim assessment using the secure browser, that all goes away.
I think what's happening is that when she's losing the student, it makes sense a little bit. It's a little bit more clear now, is that when she's losing a student that has totally has checked off the test, but is, or just logged off, then they're switching.
Oh,
that's where she may be seeing that they're on that, but I will verify to make sure that they are on secure.
yeah, and that's a
browser.
possibility. The student may have logged out of the test, closed the
Right.
secure browser, and then logged in. And that's, your Go Guardian goes into play then, and you can do just that.
Okay,
And you can find out where the students are at and what they're doing.
perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But I have a questions, and I think I know the answer, but I'll ask it anyway. My problem is when giving the speaking test using the web browser to students. I know when we do it remotely, the video on Moodle's per se, you set it up as an in-person, but now you set it up as remote or hybrid.
The Moodle has been corrected.
The